All right, everybody. Adam back with another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And as we continue to move west and we're doing the Montana bear hunt, where I'm actually going to Colorado now. I don't know if I mentioned that on the last podcast, but yeah, so that's been an evolution here, headed out to hunt Colorado again, public land this time, no outfitter, kind of the same deal I did a few years back. But every time we do this, we kind of go back into diving with gear and all that. And on every single podcast that about the flatlanders going west, the cliche is boots. You got to have good boots. That's our number one piece of gear. And we're going to try and tackle that question today as far as like how to choose a boot. What do you do? What do you look for in a boot? All that. And we have the resident expert, Will Mott from Hanwag Boots. And you're like, Hanwag, I've never heard of these boots. But as a Midwesterner, or, maybe if you're lucky enough to have been in one of the stores out west, you'd see, oh, those are those Hanwag boots, as the Midwestern would probably translate that. But they had a booth right next to Latitude at ATA, so we got to talk quite a bit with Will here, and we've got Will Mott from Hanwag to kind of go through boots for us today. So, how you doing tonight, Will?
I'm doing well, man. Hand wag, that's kind of that's a normal translation here in the US. So it might not just be it's probably not exclusive just to Midwesterners. We say it out in Colorado as well. So yeah.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so say we've got you on here to set us all straight, right?
I will say, dude, I love that you said Hanwag. That's the proper pronunciation of the brand. So, kudos to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I'm doing my research, that's part of my job, right? It's like I gotta dive in and make sure I kind of at least sound like I know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. You'd be surprised. Some people don't.
So, from that, you know, you're at ATA at like the archery trade show in the hunting industry. How did you come to this place here with the company?
Man, I mean, I never thought that I would end up at an archery trade, like a trade show. I, it was, when I started getting into sporting goods, outdoor gear, footwear, etc. I came from the rock climbing industry, so I started as a rock climbing rep in Texas, and then worked for some rock climbing shoe brands, some gear brands, selling gear to climbing shops and climbing gyms. And then, you know, I moved to Colorado about 8 years ago, and same job, working for some rock climbing brands. And then I'd say about like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, I joined Hanwag, and I became the national sales manager. And I always knew Hanwag as the alpine boots, the mountaineering boots. They used to make climbing shoes back in the day, and I kind of knew the story there. And then shortly after I started working for the brand, I realized that there was a cult following in hunting, and bow hunting in particular. And that motivated us to participate in TAC, and Western Hunt Expo and ATA. And so that this past time, when you and I met for the first time, was my second time ever at ATA. And yeah, man, it was awesome. You meet a lot of really cool people, and I think the community is really cool. Yeah, it was a pretty awesome show. I met a lot of good people.
So, how did you get into the footwear rock climbing industry? Like, what is your background?
Well, so I've been rock climbing for about 13, 14 years. I started out, climbing in gyms, and I think somewhere it's actually, yeah, somewhere along the line, I was outside climbing, in a place in Austin, Texas called the Greenbelt. And I was with some friends, and I was climbing next to a guy that he was like super old school, and it was kind of funny. He had like blonde hair, and like had like these goofy like surf sunglasses on. And I don't know, I was climbing with him, and we just started kind of talking back and forth. And then, he had some weird, like, the brand was called Mad Rock, and it was like the climbing shoe brand. And I was like, I've never seen shoes like that. Those are so ridiculous. Those are silly looking, like, I'm like, traditional climbing shoes, whatever. He's like, oh, I work for Mad Rock. And I just asked him, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like, how did you do that? Like, I was like, how did you always hear like these brands, and you never hear of like how you even get in. And so this guy was like working for a climbing brand. I'm like, how did you how did you do that? Like, how did you get that job? And he gave me his business card. And I think about, I don't know, like a couple weeks later, I hit him up. I met him at a coffee shop, and him and I just started talking. And years down the road, I ended up working for him, and he taught me how to be a sales rep. And I was started kind of from the ground up, just doing shoe demos and working for him. And he taught me a lot, actually. He's a funny guy. That guy's actually kind of a legend, actually. His name's Todd Weatherill. He was a pro wakeboarder. He was like the original announcer of the X Games. Yeah, I'll have to tell him I'm talking about him, but yeah, cool guy. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it with repping. And then, kind of once you get into the industry, it's easy to stay in the industry. You go to these trade shows, you hang out with people, you meet people from other brands, you realize that, like, dude, it's like any brand you think of, there's so many people that bounce back and forth. I mean, you have a friend that worked for, you know, Salewa or whatever, and then all of a sudden, years down the road, they're VP of sales at Black Diamond. This is an example. This isn't a real human being I'm talking about, but yeah, I mean, that's,
So
yeah.
so in that idea, like from your perspective, it's interesting because I told Will beforehand, like I kind of pulled some of the Patreons and said, hey, what are the questions that you want to hear, answered? And they said, well, maybe he won't answer this one, but we can kind of, use this context, and we won't use any names or anything like that. But so how do you see like guys like that? Because we all hear or see that, in whether it's like saddle hunting or bow, this guy shoots for this bow brand, it's the greatest brand ever, and then he works for this one and we think it's now money, it's just they're just paying him more money or whatever. So for you, when it comes to like an influencer type side, we look at people as, just that. If they're giving us their opinion and saying, okay, these are great, or maybe I helped design these boots with Hanwag, and then now I work for your competitor now, and the competitor
Mhm.
boots are great. In your space, even from like the rep side, you're going out selling these boots saying that these are great boots, or is it just like the same money conversation where you can get a better margin on our boots than those boots?
Dude, that's a really good question, to be honest with you. I mean, seriously, because like the thing is you see that all the time. You see people that they hop between brands and brands, and they'll pitch you on one brand, and then all of a sudden they're working for the direct competitor, and they're like, I know I said a lot of really good stuff about this brand, but this is the real deal. Yeah, I struggle with that. And thankfully in my career, I haven't had that happen, because I kind of went from climbing shoes to apparel, then to footwear. So I have not, I have not had that happen to me. And I think because at the end of the day, it's a business and it's sales. So, it's yeah, how do I phrase this? So it's sales, but at the same time, you have to be motivated. And I, for one, I could never work for a brand or a company. I could never sell a product that I didn't believe in. It's a hard, that's I think that's the struggle with I think what a lot of people face. And thankfully I haven't had to face that, like I've been very fortunate with every brand that I've ever worked for, worked with. I've always, been a fan of, prior to. So, and I think that also is kind of what dictates, why I choose to work where I work, I mean, I'm in the outdoor, hunt industry, I'm not in this to be a millionaire. You know, if I was chasing money, I'd sell, you know, software or, you know, gas and oil product. I have no idea. But I gotta be for me, I gotta be psyched on, what I'm doing. I never really thought I'd go into sales. I just, I'm not talented enough to be a product designer. I wish I was. That's kind of what I would want to be, I guess. But yeah, it just seems like the sexy job at least. But yeah, no, it's a good question. I know. And yeah, I don't have an answer because I haven't experienced it personally, but yeah, I think well, and I think you see a good example with folks that stick with companies and brands for a long time too. There's two ends of the spectrum, right? There's the people that chase the money and they've got a new sponsor, a new partner, or a new company that they're doing every so many years or every other year, or and then you see the people that kind of, they're around, and they're really invested in kind of making a name for the brand, and they're inspired by the story. And but obviously on that same note, like things do happen, it's like, it's tough out there economy wise. So yeah, people get laid off, they lose their jobs, that's out of anyone's control. So
Yeah. And, we talked about this a little bit at ATA, where, you guys, Hanwag in particular had, some of the YouTube influencers and stuff like that. And then it just swapped, and,
yeah.
and we were talking about who's, um, kind of repping the brand and that sort of stuff. And so for you, what was your draw? Cause you said you like to work for companies that you're like a fan of the product and the story and all of that. So kind of like, what is the story of Hanwag, and, what made you kind of gravitate towards them?
I mean, the thing is Hanwag is kind of anti mass production. Hanwag is not, it's and I switch between Hanwag and Hanvag, so forgive me. But we're anti mass production. I mean, a lot of the reasons why you don't, and a lot of people don't, have never really heard of us, is because our presence is small. And the reason our presence is small is because we refuse to mass produce our boots. We refuse to take our take our factories, or outsource labor, outsource factories. I mean, all of our boots are still made in Europe. All of our boots are still made in the, at least a large percentage is still in the village that we started in, and then the other one is a factory that we've owned for 30 years in Croatia. So I mean, our operation is small, and quality was always key. Quality was always the main focus, and it's, because you start a brand, and you start a footwear brand, and you get some investors, and then you blow up, and then you're like, all right, let's move this thing out, and let's start churning these things, and we can make dollars on the cent, and we can really start making a profit here. And I with Hanwag, it was just kind of the exact opposite. It was, no, let's continue to make a really good product, and just know that growth is going to be very slow. I mean, because we're not going to budge on our bottom line. Our bottom line is our product. And so, I think that's the foundation of the brand. As far as, the history goes, I mean, it's 100, and I think it's 101, maybe turning 102. I mean, it's over a century old, and it was started by, so Hanwag is short for Hans Wagner, and he is the founder of the brand. And he started it, slightly north of Munich in Bavaria, which is a village called Weerkirchen, I believe I'm pronouncing it right. And it was mountaineering boots and ski boots, climbing boots. We made ski boots in the 60s. And we made some of the first boot packing boots in Europe. So that's whenever you put your skis on your back and you can hike up. So they're basically like ski boots with like hiking tread on them. It's crazy. I think I have a prototype somewhere in our office, but it's, that wasn't what we started with. I mean, that was just something that we made along the way, but it was always trekking boots and hiking boots and just burly boots, built to last. And we just didn't want to compromise with our with our integrity and with our kind of our brand DNA. Yeah, I think is I hope that answers the question kind of.
Yeah, but there isn't there like some pretty interesting lineage there with brothers and things like
Oh
that.
yeah, no, for sure. So Hans Wagner and Lawrence Wagner were brothers, and Lawrence Wagner started Lova, or Loa as we know in the US. And so there was Loa and Hanwag. And Loa, exploded. They landed some early contracts, year on early military contracts, and then they went over to the US a lot sooner than we did. We haven't been in the US for very long at all. And so yeah, I mean, there was this really cool story about two brothers, bootmakers, and yeah, they both started successful boot brands. And we got, let's say, we first hit into North America, I believe, through the way of Canada. So our presence in Canada is a lot larger than our presence in the US. But yeah, that's the lineage of Hanwag. It was yeah, two brothers, and there was Loa and Hanwag. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, at least for myself, the the Loa boots, I see a lot of their like speed hikers like type boots. When we do the tack events and stuff like that.
Totally.
So when I was, like I said, I told you earlier, as far as like the pronunciation and stuff, like I try to go back and try and figure out like who I'm talking to, why I'm talking
Yeah, yeah,
to,
yeah.
all that stuff. And I was like, man, that's pretty wild. And then, to be around for that long, you got to be doing something right for the most part, right? So one of the things you said there is where you started with like mountaineering boots, and you've got kind of like a background in mountaineering. So let's kind of get into like the structure of boots and things like that. So when I first started planning my first trip out to Colorado, Idaho, in 2018, we are looking at boots, and there's a couple of things that stick out, right? So there's like a mountaineering style boot, and I think the boots that I got from you, um that's what I would think of as a mountaineering style boot, but I don't believe that it really is. But I think from a Midwestern standpoint, you're like, oh my gosh, and then you get some sticker shock with these prices of like what these cost and like how that all works out, because we here, I think, in the Midwest, and up until, like I said, when you really start to look into, you know whether it's ultralight gear or gear for the mountain, like you get sticker shock real quick, whether it's for packs or trekking poles or bipod, tripod, any of this stuff.
Mhm.
So those were some of the things for me, like looking at it going like, oh my gosh. So from that standpoint, like from like a mountaineering boot, like I said, I had told you like before, like, can you go through like what some of these terms mean? in terms of like when someone says like this has like a 1 flex, 2 flex, 3 flex, 5 flex sole or whatever, in like deer hunting redneck terms, like these are hey dudes and these are ski boots, right?
Yeah, totally. No. And the way, honestly, really like what it comes down to, when you're talking about footwear, um, a lot of people in a lot of different companies, they like to overcomplicate things, flex ratings and all of this. Really what it comes down to is the lasting board or the shank. And so, if you have a boot that is stiffer, so say like there's boot A and boot B. Boot A is significantly stiffer. Let's use the terminology you use. Let's take the ski boot and let's take the hey dude. So what you're thinking, okay, well, obviously the ski boot is significantly stiffer, it's more supportive, it's more structurally sound or whatever. And then you have the hey dude, which is very, very forgiving and very flexible, form fitting. It's softer. It all comes down to, what type of lasting board are you using? Does it have a lasting board? Now, what a lasting board is now, and before I get too in the weeds here, a lot of people use the word shank, and a lot of, and so basically what that means is that when you're building a boot, a shoe, or anything, you first start with a last, which is that fake wooden foot, and you build the shoe around it. It's basically like the reverse of a stencil. It's like the shape of the foot, the fake foot. Uh, it's a wooden fake foot, and you're building the shoe around it. You create the upper, whether it's leather, synthetic material, and then you have the base of it, which is the tread, the big outsole, that big piece of black rubber that's on the bottom of the boot. Well, in between that is the lasting board. So the lasting board or the shank is the structural support. So that is basically in between the material of the boot and the rubber tread that people call the outsole. And then and people would say, well, we'll get into midsole later, but is the lasting board. Now, however thick that lasting board is, whatever material it's made out of, whether it's fiberglass, whether it's carbon, whether it's steel, whether it's aluminum, that's going to dictate the stiffness of the boot. So, if you have a boot like the Sirius GTX, which is our hardcore mountaineering boot. So it's a boot that Donnie Vincent's quite a big fan of. That's a hardcore mountaineering boot. That's got a lot of structure. That's got a thicker that has a thicker lasting board. That has a thicker shank. And one of the reasons why it does is because it's built to support a crampon. And so if you need a crampon and you're putting spikes on your boot and you're going to ice climb or scramble, you need that rigid structural support, because if it's too soft, the crampon could fall off, your foot could bend, you wouldn't get enough traction when you're trying to climb up something. And then you compare that to something with a thinner lasting board, like something in our line would be the Makra Light, for example. It's a little more supportive, it's a little more forgiving. So that's it all comes down to the lasting board, aka the shank. Some people will say, is it a full shank boot, meaning that it's stiff from toe to heel? Some boots are stiff from heel to midfoot, like right underneath like the balls of your feet, so it's stiff there, but then it's soft at the toe box. And people get really into the weeds of like what they prefer. But it definitely comes down to that piece of material in the shoe. And companies will use any sort of proprietary blends to make their lasting boards, um, but or shanks, if you will. So yeah, it comes down. It kind of comes down to that. So yeah, as far as like flex ratings go, I mean, every brand is different, so every brand has their own different rating. I asked some of the members of the German team. I was like, so what kind of shank do we use? And they go, we don't use it. We don't use the we don't use shank. Shank is actually a term from where it originates from is actually from dress shoes. When you make a when you would make a traditional leather dress shoe, it came with a piece of metal, like a bar in the shoe that helped correct people's posture, and prisoners would wear those shoes, and they would take those shanks out of those shoes, and the term shanking someone came from. It all came from yeah the dress shoe. But anyway, nowadays in modern footwear technology, they just yeah it's essentially a lasting board.
So when you're talking about that, you gave the example of like that mountaineering boot and the Makra like lighter boot.
Yeah, yeah, Makulite.
So what uh what is necessary for a run of the mill, you know, elk hunt
Yeah,
type boot? So hiking, for most of us it's a bow hike, right? We're not cramping on anything, generally speaking. I mean, at least I would say like that 99.9% of the listeners of this podcast aren't doing any ice climbing or going across any, giant anything where they're going to have to tie off and do anything like that. So what is necessary, and where are some of these boots? Because I think that's one of the things that we have no idea, right? So
right.
A, we don't know what we're going to get into, and then B, it's all foreign, so it's like, is more expensive better, or is cheap, and everybody's on like some sort of budget, so you're
Sure.
trying to figure out like where to land. So what is necessary? So we're talking about um these different lasting boards, and
Yeah.
a lot of these boots have a rand around them, or like the rubber
Mhm.
all the
Yeah,
way
yeah.
around. And then you got synthetic, you got leather, you got a mixture of both. Like what what is necessary for someone who would be coming from the Midwest, who's going to spend 99% or 90% of the time in this boot, in relatively tame country, and then 25% of the time out in Montana, Idaho, pick a western state.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, I think it comes down to you want it you want it waterproof. You would you'd want it to have enough ankle support. Ankle support's huge. You'd want it to be supportive. So supportive in the sense that you'd want it moderately stiff, but you'd still want some flexibility to it. Um, and you'd want it to be durable. I mean, the rubber rand kind of plays into key there. I mean, it's a rubber rand continuously wrapped around the boot, so wear points. It doesn't have the same wear points as something that wouldn't have all of that. But really, yeah, I mean, waterproofing, ankle support, and then yeah, structural support, um, and yeah, some mid grade stiffness. I mean, because if you have something too soft, it's going to beat the crap out of your feet. Um, and if you have something too stiff, then it's going to hurt your Achilles tendon, because or the front of your shin, because there's no give, and so your leg is bumping in between kind of where your ankle sits, or sorry, where your shin sits, and the where your ankle support is. So you need a good amount of both, and I think honestly, and most importantly, it's got to be comfortable. I mean, it's got to be comfortable. It's got to have a good fit, you know. And I think fit is paramount. I mean, you could have all of the previous ingredients that I just laid out, but if the fit doesn't work for you, then you're going to get blisters, you're going to get, some abrasion points on your foot, and it's going to ruin your entire hunt. It's going to ruin, the entire time you're out there. I mean, you won't even be able to focus because you're in pain. So, I think, for example, I think one of the boots that I think it was the boot I sent you. I think I sent you the Ancash. Um, that is a perfect example of a boot that kind of covers everything, um, because it's got a wider base. So, like, splaying, that's something that I didn't know about before I started kind of in this career path. But splaying is basically when you put pressure on your foot. So, like, remember when we were kids and you'd go to like the footwear store or the shoe store, and they'd be like, all right, let me measure your foot while you're sitting. Now stand up. All right, let me measure your foot again. And when you stand up, your foot, there's pressure on your foot, and so your toes splay, and your foot splays out. And so one of the reasons why we created the straight fit extra, so SF extra is what we call it, but that's for splaying. It's not just a wider fit, it's a wider base. And the difference between the two is that, higher volume, um, there's higher volume shoes, meaning there's more room in the entire boot for like a like a fatter foot, if you will. But not everyone needs that. They actually just need a wider base for the splaying, and especially hunters and bow hunters in particular, and elk hunters. You have a large pack on your back. You carry out meat. I mean, it's a lot of weight. And so, um I would say that's a crucial, that is a crucial ingredient in a good piece of footwear that you might not think about, when you're buying your shoes. And unfortunately, we learn these lessons 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours into our hunt, and by that point it's too late and our feet are killing us. So, it's really important to, you know kind of master the fit thing, and then figure out, okay, do I need something stiffer? Do I need something softer? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there's no one boot fits all kind of scenario. It definitely always comes down to the person. But in my experience, that happy medium of both, I think if you were to get one boot to kind of do it all, you'd probably want, ankle support, waterproofing, good fit, and comfort.
So from there's a couple things there that guys that are listening are going like, okay, that's all well and good, but if fit is the most important thing
Yeah.
and I have to order them offline because there isn't anybody around, or, I'm taking your word for it, or I've seen them and okay,
Yeah.
he likes them, so I'm going to give him a shot. How do you master that fit from 1,000 miles away? And then two, as I'm comparing and contrasting boots online and looking at them, what are some of these uh, buzzwords or descriptors that I can read in a description that tells me that I'm going to get those features that we're talking about?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I mean, ultimately, in the perfect world, you could go to a boot store and try them on. Now, if you don't have that option, well, and online shopping today is very accommodating. I mean, you can order a pair of boots and put them on and try them out, and you can ship them back, you know, as long as you don't, go run through the mud in them, and most brands are pretty accommodating in that. I know we're accommodating like that as well. We have to be. So, you know, I would say things to look for. I mean, for us specifically, it's going to be, our fit story. So, straight fit extra is kind of what I highlighted earlier. Straight fit extra is going to have that wide base. Then we also offer a wide fit, but that's a regular base, but a wider upper. So say you fit kind of a regular foot, like you wear like a traditional size shoe, but you just have a wider foot. It's just a higher volume up top of the foot. Then a wide would be better off for you. Our standard fit is pretty. I would say that the standard Hanwag fit is comparable to any sort of like mass produced metrics. Like I always tell people, like whatever you wear in Vans footwear is what you'd wear in Hanwag. So it's the standard fit is we don't run narrow, we don't run wide. It's pretty true to size all around. We also make we make a bunion fit. So it's wider in the sense where the bunion traditionally sits on the inside of the, I think, the ball of your foot below your big toe, for example. But so we make a bunion foot, or a bunion fit. And yeah, I mean, I would say, the message to, if anyone's looking on the website, pay attention to whether it's straight fit extra wide. If we don't call out a size, it's just standard fit. And then of course the bunion option, if you know that you have a bunion, then that's a no-brainer. But most folks are pretty happy with our standard fit. And if they say they are a wide foot or they like more room in the toe box, then go straight fit extra. And then if you really like, just, if you're like, if you're really in tune to your foot and you know that you just have a higher volume foot, you're like, man, my foot is like busting out of the top of most shoes that I wear, then the wide fit is for you. But we've been pretty successful with the straight fit extra. And I will say, and one thing that I don't think a lot of people know is that, so we are, Hanwag is owned by Phoenix, which is owned by, that's our parent company in North America, and we are, well, in global rather, but they also own Fjallraven. So if you're near a Fjallraven brand store, I believe there's 30 something across the US, you can go to a Fjallraven store and you can try on a pair of Hanwags, and they'll order you a pair free of charge to try on. And they're extremely accommodating over there. So, that's not, it's not the same brand, it's two different brands, but they do carry our footwear. So if you're not near a retailer, but you're near a Fjallraven store, it's very easy for you to go in and try on any of our key styles in the assortment. You can always ask a staff member, "Hey, can you order me a pair of Alaskas and Alaska wides? Can you order both of those? Can I try on both? Is that okay?" The answer is always yes. Like, they're more than happy to do it, because even if you don't buy them, worst case scenario, they put them in our inventory and we'll sell them to the next person. So no big deal there. Um, yeah.
So with materials,
Mhm.
um, we've got, leather, we've got a mixture, we've got synthetic.
Yep.
What in one, one of our kind of things that we've noticed over the years with different kind of boots is that having a mixture of the different things, it seems like you always have some sort of a leak or some sort of an issue. So if you get an all leather upper, seems like in our experience it's been better. Like, from your perspective, from a waterproofing standpoint, like, how do you choose a boot that's going to be the most waterproof down to the worst waterproof, and then care for like extra waterproofing, or just overall maintenance to prevent leaks and things?
Well, first off, leather is key. Leather is key. Leather is, I apologize to all the vegans out there, but leather is superior to synthetic every time. I mean, like, do both materials stretch? Absolutely. Synthetic will stretch right back to its original fit if you dry it out. Leather does not. Leather molds to your foot. You're going to break in a pair of leather boots. It's going to fit the best. And um, it's a superior material, and there's a reason for it. Now, when it comes to waterproofing, so, you know, more often than not, when boots are waterproof, when they have the Gore-Tex hang tag on there, what that means is that they stitched Gore-Tex material on the inside of the boot. So it's not like, oh, I bought some Gore-Tex boots. Well, when you bought some leather boots or you bought some synthetic boots, and then the inside of the boot, they have a layer of Gore-Tex. So that's the waterproof material, is on the inside of the boot. Now, if you have a synthetic boot that has the Gore-Tex membrane, well, synthetic material tends to hold water and absorb water faster than leather. So, you often hear stories of people buying synthetic boots that tend to wet out faster than leather boots. And that's because the outer material is not nearly as durable or naturally waterproof like leather is. Um, and thus, eventually causing the shoe to wet from the outside in. And, Gore-Tex is not the perfect material. I mean, there's a water column rating on every piece of Gore-Tex. And, the story behind Gore-Tex is not waterproof. The story behind Gore-Tex is waterproof and breathable. So, because you have to have a breathability rating, because what happens if there is, you said before, you're like the ultimate waterproof. Well, the ultimate waterproof is a piece of plastic wrapped around your foot. But what happens if you wrap a piece of plastic around your foot? Well, then your foot can't breathe and it sweats from the inside, thus creating moisture on the inside of the boot, because now you're sweating because your foot can't breathe. So that's the same thing. You ended up, what you didn't want, right? I always made that joke whenever I was talking about rain jackets, because people were like, well, what's the water column rating? Like what's the waterproofing? And I'm like, well, it's 30K, which means 30,000 millimeters of water before it wets, it precipitates or it leaks through. And they're like, well, isn't there like one that doesn't have any and it's just permanently waterproof? I'm like, yeah, that's a sheet of plastic. Like, you can't, so really it's the classic balance of waterproofing and breathable, and leather on the outside, because as people say, leather is nature's Gore-Tex. So, could you buy a pair of waterproof boots and walk through, a marsh or like a puddle, or like a low creek bed with some water running through it and be okay? Absolutely fine. Yeah, of course. Could you completely submerge your foot in water for, hours on end and expect it to be dry? Absolutely not. Um, so it's also it comes from like mindful trekking um to also just, yeah, I mean, the raw materials in the boot. So yeah, I mean, I guess to answer your question, a leather boot with a Gore-Tex membrane is crucial. That's where you're going to find the most success. And then, we also make leather lined boots. I mean, there's boots that have no Gore-Tex in them at all, and are lined with leather. And those have their advantages as well, because say you're wearing some leather lined boots and you go through some rain, and maybe your feet get wet. You're on a multi-day hunt, backpacking trip. You lay your boots out, you know rip out the tongue, pull the tongue out rather, and just let it dry. That leather lined boot is going to dry faster than something with a Gore-Tex membrane in it. And so, it's there's many ways to go about it, but you know Gore-Tex does a good job with the material that they create. And I think leather is naturally just a superior fabric, or I guess you can't really say fabric, superior material. So yeah, I would That's what I would look for.
So so again, what about the the care for the leather
Yeah.
and synthetic material if you do have a because I mean obviously you sell boots that are mixed materials, synthetics, all of that. So what is the care for those types of materials to try and help that waterproofing, as well as is there a proper care for the Gore-Tex liner?
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, I'd say like 90% of our boots are leather. I mean, even the very colorful boots, I mean, that's just suede leather. And when they're a synthetic hybrid, that could be just meaning that the tassels and the lace loops and the upper might be like Dyneema. So but yeah, for the most part, it's all leather as well. But the care for it, I mean, really honestly, it depends on where you are. If you're where I am and you're in the high desert, Colorado, you're gonna want to wax your boots at least once a year. I know we sell wax, we sell care products. I know that, but I mean the main ingredient in our care products is beeswax. So, if you go to any Western store, any cowboy boot store, there's tons of treatments there. But really the main ingredients is beeswax. And really why that's important is you want to make sure that you're maintaining that leather. You want to make sure that, you know, you're you're um you're keeping it kind of moist, and also the waxing also offers some waterproofing too. It's basically the same as like spraying Scotch Guard on a pair of jeans if you want to go ski in jeans. It's basically just creating a layer of natural DWR coating. It's that wax layer, and that soaks right into the leather, and it's just a good way to treat the leather. And by waxing the leather, it's as simple as getting a can, sticking your fingers, and just rubbing it around the boot. You could do it with a paper towel. It's not a sophisticated process at all. I mean, I waxed my boots probably about a week ago, and it was not. I got a paper towel and just rubbed it on my boots. It's not, there's nothing technical about it. It's pretty old school. Yeah. So, yeah, I'd say that's the proper care of a leather boot. You just, if you're taking it through the ringer, you're going on a long trip, just make sure you wax them once a year. I do it every fall before it snows.
And so you had mentioned, um, depending on where you are and you being in the high desert, is that because um it'll dry out
To
and
dry,
and
yeah.
and and so if you're not in, that sort of thing, still once a year, but it's not once a week or once a month unless you're out baking in the sun or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's kind of by feel. It's like for me, it's drier over here, so I've got to wax them once a year just to maintain because of the lack of humidity. But even where you're somewhere where it's pretty humid, you're in the Midwest, you're in Texas, you're in Missouri, it's pretty humid over there. I mean also has, waxing also has some really important properties in it as well. I mean it can fight off like mold, from the outside. You're basically just applying like a coating around the boot that, preserves it from either a harsh dry climate or a humid climate. It all just depends on kind of what affects the boot. It's kind of it's the same argument as like an acoustic guitar. You go to a guitar center and you go to the acoustic guitar section in Colorado, they've got a humidifier in there, right? You go to a guitar center in the Midwest in the acoustic center, they've got a dehumidifier in there. So it's the same thing. It's just basically fighting the elements. So um but yeah, I mean, it's still the proper use of, or the proper application of putting that treatment on the boot.
So, uh, you said a lot of good things about leather and the material, how it's superior, all these things.
Yeah.
Now, one of the questions that came up, is in even in asking this question, like I'm thinking it through in my head, and I'm like, well, it's kind of silly because these guys are paying the same amount of money for a pair of work boots, but they're just in them every day. So they want to know, like, what is the difference between like their work boots that have a decent lug on them, so there are some that are just for concrete with a softer sole, and some that are kind of like outdoor work boots, but like a good leather work boot. What sets apart like a good leather hunting boot from a good leather work boot?
You know, so it's interesting too because I'd have to, I guess I'd almost have to examine, I guess, the said work boot, but you know, because what's funny is where my head automatically goes is we sell a lot of our boots are sold as work boots. The Alaska GTX, for example, that's a Canadian tough guy work boot. That's a a Pacific Northwest, Minnesota, boot. And so, more often than not, a lot of these good work boots are, outdoor hiking boots. But if you're thinking of like, okay, so let's, for the sake of the question, let's say, okay, like a pair of like a pair of cat work boots that have a good lug on them. They're very comfortable, they're very durable, they probably have a steel toe. you know they probably, they're probably got a lot of ankle support. But is that boot going to be structurally supportive for a long hike? It may protect you against something falling on your toe, but is that steel toe, is that necessary for a long hunt where you're spending hours hiking? I mean, that weight of those materials that are keeping your foot safe in a work environment may hinder you, 6 hours in the backcountry on no trail. So, it's like almost like it's almost like you have a boot for protection for working in, dangerous environments. If you're working construction or welding. Oh, and then you also have a boot where you're like, hey, I need something that I gotta walk in for a long time. And I need that, you know, the lug patterns just, it's kind of not really like a fix all. You need something that has like a concaved fit so it rocks as you walk, or it's got to have some forgiveness, when you're trekking. So, you know, it's definitely, I would suggest, having, if you are the type of, if you are the customer where you work day in and day out in a good pair of work boots, I'd save those for work. I'd save those for protection, and I would get something that, is built for, um, mobility, something that is built for a long hours on the trail or in the backcountry, something that's going to be more supportive in that regard.
And so for yourself, um, for the mountain or whatever, like
Yeah.
what do you prefer? Like out of your line, like what's your like go-to boot for, kind of all the things we've outlined?
Right now, I am running the Tatra Top. Um, I wear the Tatra Top and the Macrolite. I wear the Tatra Top for, yeah, just long backpacking trips. I'm supposed to go on a hunt here. Um, yeah, I'm terrified. I'm not a new hunter, dude. Oh, it's gonna be rough, man. But yeah, I run the Tatra Top. I like the Tatra Fit. It's basically a traditional trekking boot. It was built for German Sherpas. They're called porters, and so a lot of ankle support, a lot of structural support. It's pretty stiff. Um, and then the top is just it's a high top version of the Tatra. It's a mid. I really like that one a lot. It broke in relatively quickly, and I can't kill it, so it's the one I have. But I wear the Machra Light because that's what I wear on like approaches, for like, alpine approaches, summertime when I'm going up into the alpine. And I don't need a big heavy boot. I need something softer, but I still need ankle support from years of sucking at skateboarding and having horrible ankles. I have to have ankle support. And so, yeah, and that's kind of built like it's kind of got an approach shoe kind of fit to it, so it's easier to get across like granite slabs and stuff like that. So yeah, but I'd say the one that I'd go to would be like the Tatra top. It's a leather boot, high top, Gore-Tex, and then it's got a really solid lasting board on it too. So it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. It's not too stiff, but stiff enough. It's not very soft. It's just that's kind of that's my go-to right now. That's the one that I really like.
One other thing that I just popped into my mind when we were talking about this, one of the other questions is like from uh, customer service support type standard, getting a hold of somebody, all of that stuff. Like, so you're based out of Colorado. I'm assuming that there's a United States division or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. Um, but as far as like resoling these boots, like if you need that, and then like I remember like opening up the box and kind of going through all the stuff, and it said something of the to the nature of like, these boots should be inspected like every 4 to 6 years, and I was like, well, I mean, that's somewhat reassuring, right? It's like it's not that that we need to see them every 6 months or every year or something like that.
Like 4 to 6
But
years.
yeah, yeah.
A
So
long time.
so the but like for resoling or anything like that, like for like long term care or whatever for these boots, like what's the support like?
No, no, I'm glad you brought that up because so first off, yeah, all of our boots are resolable. So all of our boots are fully resolable. Everything that we make is built to all the soles are made to come right off and be attached right back on. And we have two cobblers or two resole centers in the US. One is in the Pacific Northwest, one is in Colorado, but it doesn't really matter where they're located because you can find out that information on our website under our warranty department. Also, all of our boots come with a 2-year warranty. So 2 years, you're good to go. Even after that 2 years, you can still get your boots resoled. Depending on what kind of resole and what kind of repair you need. It could be anywhere from $40 to $100 to $120, just depending on what you need. I mean, it's a case by case scenario. Um, but yeah, I mean, we see boots from 20 years old to 8 years old being resold. Once you've got a good boot that you've broken in and you've taken good care of or whatever, and you just love them, you can send that to a resale center. You do it through us, through our website. Our North American headquarters is in Colorado, right outside of Boulder, and our warehouse is in Aurora, outside of Denver, and yeah, we work as a filter through getting boots taken care of, and so yeah, I mean it's a pretty, in my opinion, I think it's a pretty awesome program, and I'm actually really looking forward to seeing more developments on that. Just trying to figure out, because we're still in the early phases too, because we buy all of our soles when we buy our boots, so we're learning like what soles we need to stock up on more than others. So yeah, it's we take care of our customers, for sure. When it comes to repairs and resoles and warranty and everything like that. We're not going to sell you a we're not going to sell you a $400 boot and then say, "All right, see you later." We're trying to be the last boot you'll ever buy.
I say that with like a couple other things, like somewhat that's a terrible business model because we just want to sell you one thing, and so it's great, you
We're the
know.
opposite of Apple. Yeah.
um, yeah. So for what like major retailers, or if someone was like, okay, if there was one place that I was going to go to see a Hanwag boot, like where would I go?
As far as major retailers go, let's see. Well, it depends on where you are. If you were over if you were over on the East Coast, I would say go visit Outland USA. They've got a beautiful storefront there. Um, it's over in, I think, Nashville, I believe. If you're out in the desert area, go visit Go Hunt. Those are good friends of ours. Go Hunt's got a beautiful showroom. They carry a wide variety of footwear I mean, a wide variety of Hanwag. And if you are, let's see, I mean, well, and also, the Fiel Raven stores as well. Let's see. We've got a lot of online retail partners. Let's see what else. I'm trying to think of another store another large storefront that I would recommend. I would say I'm trying to think off the top of my head of as far as like, if you're in Utah, go to Gary's Shoes south of Salt Lake. Those guys, old school boot fitter, and he carries our footwear as well. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'd say the Fial Raven stores, those retailers that I just rattled off right there, as far as like store funds. Oh, Backcountry Experience in Colorado, um, in Durango, Backcountry Experience. Um, Yeah, I mean, I probably I those are the ones that come to my head. I don't have my account list in front of me,
Sure,
forgive me,
sure.
but yeah, those are the guys that we've worked with for a long time. So,
Yeah. I just didn't know if there was like a Shields or something where it would be like, okay, this is this is some common denominator where we can
oh yeah,
check
yeah,
them
yeah.
out, you know. But definitely Go Hunt, and I know that we've seen them on there, and it's not, you know, it's not a new brand, but it's definitely, you know, one that you don't see all the time. So I really enjoy being able to have this like long form conversation, kind of like about the brand and how everything you know has transpired, as well as like what to look for
Yeah.
in the boots and everything. So if people have questions or concerns, anything you know they want to know more other than just at this podcast, like where's the best place for them to go to get any of their questions answered or anything like that?
I would say right off the bat, I'd say go to our website, hanwag.com. Just how it's spelled, hanwag.com. That's where you're going to find all the information, our brand story. Also, if you're on Instagram, I would suggest giving Hanwag Hunting underscore NA for North America. So Hanwag Hunting underscore NA. That's where you're going to find like all of our hunt content. I think I give product reviews on there as well. We're gonna be doing some collaborations with Donnie Vincent on there as well. Santino Castellanos, a good friend of mine, also a Colorado dark horse bow hunter himself. He's on there quite a bit too, and so we pump out a lot of information on our social media site. And I say site. We don't have, we don't have a Facebook. I don't think we do. Maybe we should. I don't know. I haven't looked into that. but but yeah, yeah. So Instagram, and then there's also some overview videos on YouTube as well. as far as boot care goes. But yeah, I'd say our website, hanwag.com, and hanwag hunting underscore NA. Yeah, that's where you can find us.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time, and definitely be following along with your upcoming hunt. I can't wait to. We'll have to reconvene
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that
yeah.
one and then kind of go through that. So I appreciate the
Yeah.
time.
Of course, man. I really appreciate you having me on, man. And good luck with your hunt in Colorado. I should have asked you where you were going.
Well, that's one of those you can't talk about that on the podcast
Uh,
because you know
yeah.
it's all the spot saving. But no, we'll
Okay.
be somewhere around like Grand Junction area.
Somewhere around there. No worries, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. Well, I can't wait to talk to you again, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, take care.